Welcome into the Tour Coach, everybody. I'm your host, Tony Ruggiero. First of all, we're excited to be joining the Golfer Gang Network, which is a collection of podcasts just like us, just like ours. It's all people who love the game, love the journey. They've got some great stories to share. And here on the Tour Coach, you're going to hear a collection of conversations from the people I meet around the coaching and teaching world. And every story has a lesson, and every lesson is designed to help you enjoy, love, coach, and play the game of golf better. And we couldn't do that at all without the support of our sponsors, especially Mitch McConnell, Buick GMC. The folks there have been with me through it all from the very beginning, as well as Shrixon Cleveland Golf. It's been a hell of a run with those folks, coming up on almost 24, 25 years. You got Bushnell, Vineyard Vines, our newest sponsor, Epic Western. Their tequila drinks often fuel some of our late night podcasts. You need to go on epicwestern.com and just look at what they've got to offer. Order some in for yourself. But these next few Tour Coach podcasts are very special to me. I did this once before. In going through the old DewSweeper archives, my old friend and former producer of the DewSweepers, Ralph Carroll, dug up some of the old series and conversations that I used to have with my longtime mentor, Hank Johnson, who was a Golf Digest Top 50, Golf Magazine Top 100. He was a PGA Teacher of the Year, and in my estimation was one of the most brilliant people I ever was around. It's no secret we had a interesting relationship, crazy up and down, but he's so responsible for everything that I do today. And this next series of podcasts here is going to be taking these old conversations from the DewSweepers that I had with HJ on a series he did on power, and we are going to replay those. But first, before that, Wayne Flint, who both him and I came up under HJ, and then Jackson Koert, who just because he's come up under me, knows so much about HJ, has heard all these stories. Sit down and we take the old radio interviews and kind of discuss them and put them in more modern day times. So super excited to deliver these next 4 episodes called Power. The Power episodes with HJ, some insight into what he thought, how it's aged, how it can help your game, and how it's influenced us as teachers. And if you're a teacher or a player, this is well worth the listen. Once again, thanks to all our sponsors. Excited to be part of the Golfer Gang Network. Hope you enjoyed these next several podcasts. I'm excited to bring them to you. It brings back some nostalgia, but lots of good times coming up, trying to learn how to coach and teach this crazy game. So stay with me. It's an exciting episode. It's going to help all of you play better here on the Tour Coach. All right, so joining me here on the Tour Coach, this is another one of those fun ones that we get to do. And I'm going to admit, guys, when I was driving and I was listening to these old recordings, brings back a bunch of memories. Wayno, I'm sure you as well. Jackson, you didn't get the chance to know HJ, but he probably would have given you a few zingers and as well. But our good friend Ralph Carroll, who was my radio producer for 15 years for on DewSweepers and on Tour Radio and all that, found these old recordings that we did with Hank Johnson on the tee with HJ back in the old DewSweepers Radio. And Hank, over the years, Wayne and Jackson did some of these series that, as you go back and you all the stuff, the content that's available now and that is out there, these things to me, the first thing, Wayne, I thought was, one, how much of it I use exactly today. 2, like what a foundation it was. But 3, how a lot of it was ahead of its time. And I would have loved the opportunity to have run some of this, to have brought Hank to see Colby in the gym at Joey D's down there, and to do some of that, because I think he would have liked it. I'm sure he would have had a zillion questions, but it was pretty cool. What were your thoughts before we head into this?
What were my thoughts on it?
Yeah.
Oh, there's no doubt he was well ahead of his time. And it's amazing. He gave us, as young teachers, he gave us such a great basic foundation to develop off of. It's, and that's what you and I have tried to do, helping other young guys along. And we think that's important. And I believe that's what the game's really all about. I mean, I was so fortunate to have the Golf Digest guys helping me, and Hank the whole time obviously was a main influence on me. And just how smart those guys were, and how hard they worked. I mean, they worked really hard to be smart, and they worked really, really hard to get better, all the time. And we were just all us young guys were so fortunate to be able to hang around those guys and watch them do their craft. And now we're kind of the old guys now, and
Oh yeah.
it's a lot of fun, helping young guys along the same way. It really is for me. I know it's really really floats my boat. I like that a lot. So,
Jackson,
but it's amazing how good he was.
Jackson, what were your thoughts listening to some of these old ones? Because you've heard us all talk, but curious what a young teacher thinks about some of these older recordings.
There's a really good way in which he describes things, and it's beautifully simple, but there's also a lot of depth in there where I think when people listen to it, if you're a 22 handicap, you should understand it pretty well. And if you're an advanced golfer or a coach, I think it's going to give you a different light in which you can see something, which is kind of the way I took it. He does a very good job at explaining things full picture, but simply.
Agree. That very well said. So let's episode one, part one of this series that he did on power, which was, if I'm not mistaken, this was back in 2006 or 7. I have to go back and look. I should have looked before we recorded it, but so you're talking 17 years ago. With the first one of power was pivot, and I it's funny because I started off a lesson with a newer golfer today, and I go through the things that I think are important, and I still use the term, I still talk about how the pivot's the engine of the golf swing, and that is the main power source. And obviously this is where I got it. I love the parts in there that he talks about how you kind of start the backswing with the upper body, your chest, and how everything's connected, and how that's what winds the hip back. And I love his comments in there also, Wayne and Jackson, about, people trying to get over there with shift and moving weight laterally. And also some of the talk in there about what happens if the knees straighten. What did you think about that, Wayne?
Well, it's I think it's great, and I use it every day. I try to keep the feet holding the ground, and I try to keep the front of the kneecaps very still. And he mentioned over your shoestrings. I still use that as kind of a basis of where I kind of want the kneecaps to stay. And I try to get the upper body to wind going back, and I let the the shoulders, I want that to wind the chest, and I want the chest to wind the rib cage and the tummy, and then I want the tummy to kind of wind up the hips. And I want to take that as far back as I can, keeping the flex in that right knee, keeping the pressure in that right knee, and let that mass move as much as I can into that right leg at the top of the swing. So I still use a lot of those same words and ideas. Obviously we have other things that we use to teach it with, maybe like a little board that wobbles to the right, the Sheftick board, that shows people when that weight gets over there, how that board, the right side of that board will move down. And we learn a lot about front leg and back leg posting and all that stuff. But I would say, generally speaking, my preferences are, with most people, before I dig into that, I try to get them very centered up and try to teach them to turn their upper body back against their lower body to kind of wind that engine up as tight as we can, and that's proven to be very successful for me over a number of years now. I mean, I've helped a lot of people play better golf, and I think as a basis for young teachers, especially if they would, if they could stay there and really learn to do that, I think they would develop their craft quickly, because I think their students would get better, and it would be less frustrating or less disappointing when if you can't make anybody hit it better. And I think just a centered pivot, the way Hank talks about it, I think will really make more people good than a lot of other things, trying to find some kind of a little secret. I think if you can train people to have a centered pivot, I think they can get better pretty quick.
Jackson, what were your thoughts on this? The thing it brought back a lot of ways of things to me that, sometimes you forget, but also I saw so many things and listened to so many things that I still use today. The interesting thing to me was it was really not a lot of people. Everybody talks about the sequence out of the top. I don't know that many people talk about the sequence to the top and how the body moves, right? And I thought that was a big part of what HJ said. And he would always, I can remember him saying to me in that shitty old building at Sandestin at the back, but like he would always talk about, you go chest, it winds up, winds the hips, and then it's the reverse coming down, right? So Jackson, what were some of your thoughts as you listened to these?
Just how he talked about setup before the pivot stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Preparing you to move well, and he didn't go into extreme detail about it, but I know he hasn't loved it just from being around you guys, but obviously the precursor to your motion and being able to set up that pivot and the connection.
Yeah, and stuff too. A lot of stuff that we hear about. This was the precursor to using the ground. He basically talked about feeling the ground in your setup and those things. And again, I just thought, to me, there's not one person that could listen to this that's going to make you worse. I don't care what philosophy you're trying to aspire to. I don't care what's going on in your golf swing. This is one of those ones to me. I don't know how listening to this and trying any of this could mess you up. Do you, Wayne?
No, I think this is. I think 95% of the people out there playing golf, if they would just focus on these 1, 2, 3, 4 things we're going to talk about here in these next 3, 4 podcasts, and just try to do that for an extended period of time, they will not get worse. There's no way they can get worse. And especially, if you can get them to practice it slowly, like he talked about, trying to learn to do motions slowly and do them very correctly. There's just no way that if you train your body slowly to do these 3, 4, 5 simple things that you're not going to get better. I look back and I listened to him, and then I look back on my old first lesson that I used to do all the time. That's in your book, Tony. It's a lot of the same things. The power source, the engine is the pivot, and it's the power source, and you have to train that first, and then you go down the chain. After you've built the power source, and then you add to that, and then you get to the top, and then you learn how to move from the top down to the ball, and use the ground even more, and deliver the club. And if you could get everybody doing that, they're all going to get better. There's no question.
And as we wrap it up, I think the one thing too that struck me, Jackson in particular, is all through the episode, he's basically telling you how to practice, like talking about doing it slow, talking about regardless of what skill level, like this is, like always in mind, where the student is and what they're doing, right? And I think in one part of the series, he mentions like, hey, this golf is something you learn by doing, right? Not reading or listening. So you need to go out there and you need to do this and then ask some questions, right? And I thought that was pretty good, right? Because that's, where we are in this world. Hell, I'm part of it to blame. We got a gazillion videos on YouTube now, but like people go watch stuff, whereas like he's telling you to watch it, but you got to go out there and try it. You got to kind of think through it by yourself.
Well, there's no question. I say it every day in my teaching that you do have to understand the concept. And that's why I take time away from the ball and I sit people down and I show them and explain the concept, because they have to buy into that. They've got to be all in with us when we're teaching somebody into the concept of what we're trying to do. But then I follow that up with the only way you're ever going to learn to do something new is to do it. You can't think about it and then do it the same old way you used to do it and have it magically appear. It'll never work that way. You have to physically learn to do it. And those things are, generally speaking, learned at a slower rate of speed, and then taken to ownership and then in time you can do it under pressure in a tournament situation or whatever the case may be.
Guys, this has been fun. We're going to turn this over to the old episode now of HJ and myself talking about the first segment of his series, Power. The pivot is what it's talking about. I think everybody's going to get something out of this. This was great. Guys, stay tuned. There'll be more from us in just a minute. Welcome back into the DewSweepers, everybody. It is a thrill, as we do every week, to go on the tee with Mr. Hank Johnson, our Dean of Instruction here at the DewSweepers. And this week, we're going to talk a little bit about something that we have students always want to know, and that's how they can get more power. We're going to start with a first segment in a series here on Power with Hank. Hank, how you doing this morning?
Tony, I'm doing really good. I hope you are.
I'm doing fantastic. I'll tell you what, you just heard me say, Hank, I know you get it all the time. Boy, it's hard to find a student that comes to you that tells you they wouldn't like to hit it a little further or have a little more power.
Well, even if they don't tell you, they want it. And the game is certainly going in that direction. Golf courses are getting longer and longer and longer. So just a fact of life that you got to get as much power out of your game as you can.
You know, Hank, the thing I like about this is the first segment in a series. And as always, there's no magical pixie dust here that's being given out. This is going to start a series to kind of help people know the process and the things that they have to do in their golf swing to help generate power.
Well, that's the goal, Tony, and we're going to break it up into little small pieces so that hopefully our listeners can learn it as they go along.
Well, let's go ahead and start with today. I believe today's first segment, we're going to talk about the windup.
Yeah, you know, the pivot or the turning motion of your body is really the motor of the swing. It does all the work. It's where all the big muscles in your body are, and you have to learn to properly use that so that your swing has a big engine. And that's going to be the context of our discussion today.
Well, let's go ahead and talk about that power source and what happens during the backswing.
Well, your pivot or your body turn is really made up of four components: your feet, your knees, and your hips, and your shoulders. And you certainly can turn those back and through and create motion, and that will create a certain amount of power. But the key to really maximizing your power is to learn to create coil or elastic loading in the big muscles of your body, and those muscles are in your upper legs and your hips and your trunk. So we're going to talk about how you can elastically load the big work muscles in your body to create a more powerful pivot than you would if you were just turning back and turning through.
So if I'm visualizing this correct, Hank, one of the things people ask, or you see people that are really trying to wind their hips or they move their legs during the backswing, that type of motion actually reduces your power because you're trying to wind your upper body up against your lower body.
Well, it increases motion, but it decreases coil, which is what we're going to try to enhance. Now, if you just think about shooting a bow and arrow, you hold the bow still, then you pull the string back, and pulling the string back bends the bow or loads the bow, stresses the bow, creates resistance, and therefore loading in the bow so that when you let the string go, it shoots the arrow. Now, if you pulled them both back, you wouldn't create any loading, and when you let the arrow go, it wouldn't go anywhere because you don't have that power stored up to release in the forward movement of the arrow. The same is true with your golf swing. Now, you want to create resistance with your lower body going back. So your feet hold the ground. Your knees need to stay as still as they possibly can while you wind up the upper part of your trunk, your shoulders, and your chest against that resistance. And that stretches all the muscles around your core, and that's why there's so much emphasis on core stability now. You have to be able to keep your core still in order to do this. But it's a matter of creating motion against resistance so that you develop elastic loading in the big muscles of your body.
One of the things that's going to be on the website or is on the website about this segment, Hank, is about that it's critical to start from a balanced and centered address position. If you wouldn't mind, just talk about that for a second and its importance.
Well, any athletic movement that requires you to be ready to move in any direction, I would consider to be a three-dimensional sport because you don't really know which direction you're going to have to move in. And golf is a three-dimensional motion because the club starts in front of you along with your arms. It swings around to the right and goes behind you, and then it swings back out to hit the ball, and it swings around your body again to the left. So the motion of the swing is upward, inward, and backward going back, all three dimensions, and then going forward it goes down and out and through. So you got to be braced so that none of those motions pull you off balance. Now, if you just think about an athlete in any sport, they are in a ready position, centered. Their feet are ready to move in any direction. Their knees are flexed, their butt's out, their head and the chest are up, and they're ready for action. They're not favoring any direction. And one of the drills that we use is to have a golfer get in their address position and close their eyes and try to feel that centered position, to get in a position where if you wanted to spring yourself straight up in the air, you could do that, so you're not leaning in any direction.
If you talk about the backswing, Hank, and you talk about elastic loading in the backswing, how much should your hips rotate, and does the right knee straighten at all? We get a lot of questions that ask that type of question as people want to get the club all the way back to parallel and to go further down that line. Do you gain anything by being able to get the club all the way back to parallel?
Well, I think the thing to remember is the position at the top of the backswing is pretty much dictated by the flexibility of the player. And you can get the club farther back and make a longer looking swing, but it may not be nearly as powerful or nearly as efficient. So the ideal would be to go back as far as you can go, given your flexibility, without giving anything up. Now, you want to hold your lower body as still as you can, and since you're turning toward your back leg, actually turning over your back leg, your right knee is a critical factor. My preference is for it to not move at all. Now, there's some players that let it give a little bit, they let it straighten up, but they don't let it move out or back. They keep the angle from the hip to the foot the same. But I think if you can just hold that right kneecap right over your shoelace while you turn back, that creates the maximum resistance and the greatest potential elastic loading. But again, that's a function of your flexibility.
What about the idea of shifting your weight and whether there's any lateral movement or shifting of the hips in the backswing?
Well, again, it's a matter of preference, but if we're talking about just the potential for power, and you believe that the golf swing is a rotary motion, as I do, and I know you do, then any lateral shifting decreases the efficiency of the motion. So I think you want to keep your hips right between your feet. Your shoulders need to stay centered, certainly in the backswing. You just don't want a lot of shifting in a lateral direction, certainly going back, because I think that gives away power, and it also creates the need to shift in the other direction going forward, which is a whole nother problem altogether. I think if you think of the center of your pivot, and the definition of a pivot is rotation around a fixed center, then the top of your spine is really the center of your shoulder rotation, and the bottom of your spine is the center of your hip rotation. And I just don't think either of those 2 points need to move very much laterally in your backswing. You need to be able to wind around them.
Same thing goes for the head, Hank. Does your head stay relatively steady?
Well, I think the head can turn a little bit, but it shouldn't move. I don't know that it has to stay absolutely dead still. It can rotate a little bit with your shoulders if that lets you increase your shoulder turn, but it shouldn't move into a different location.
Another question along these lines, Hank, that we've had here into the Dew Sweepers is when you get to the top of your backswing or when you get to the end of your range of motion at the end of your pivot, where should you feel the weight on your right side? Is there a place that you can tell when you're all the way wound up, you can feel where the weight or the pressure is?
Well, there's definitely a buildup of pressure under your right foot. But I think it's probably a misperception to say that the weight has really shifted that much towards your right foot. You don't really relocate a lot of the weight, especially in the center of your body. Now, if your chest is turning to the right, if it's turning over your back, knee, and leg the way it should, then the upper part of your body, the mass of that is going to relocate the center of gravity of your body to the right. But I think an active weight shift in the backswing is probably not a good thing. I think that hurts you more than helps you.
Hank, I think we've given out some good information here, helping people understand the importance of the windup in the backswing. And as always, I think one of the real beneficial things to Dew Sweepers out there and people looking to improve their game is that this stuff's going to be right up there on DewSweepersGolfShow.com, so you can always go back and read through this and make some notes and take it to the golf course with you.
Well, we're certainly going to put this up there, and we're going to put the other segments. And the next segment we're going to talk about would be what happens with the arms and hands in the wind-up, so that you get all the way to the top and you're ready to release all this power you stored up. And again, I want to throw in an encouragement for our listeners to send us some email questions. We can't know what to talk about unless they tell us what they want to hear about. So keep communicating with us.
Absolutely, and that's one of the great things, Hank, about these segments is we keep getting questions and we keep addressing that. And I think we're starting to address a lot of people's concerns and needs here when we start talking about power and how to help people hit it a little longer off the tee and help them reach some of those par fives and two.
Or even the par fours and two.
That's true. That's true. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves there. We'll start by helping people reach the par fours and two. Hank, as always, it's been great. We'll really look forward to having you on next week as we're going to talk about what the arms and hands do.
Tony, I always look forward to being on your show.
All right. That's great stuff. Thank you so much, Hank. As always, we'll look forward to next week.
Take care.